Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and about what's next. It's a show that wants to ask questions, peel back the layers of our average everyday experience, and go beyond scratching the surface. We interview amazing people with incredible ideas and stories who have done wild, weird, and wonderful things. Remember that imagination shared creates collaboration, and collaboration creates community, and community inspires social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. So my interview today is with Sean Campbell. He is the senior director of strategic initiatives at Samaritan's Purse in Calgary. He is the chair of the board for the Stevens Children Foundation, an organization that's doing some great work in the slums of Cairo with a woman by the name of Mama Maggie, who's often called the Mother Teresa of Cairo. We talk a little bit about her. We talk about love and compassion. We talk about something that Sean refers to as a God stamp in our hearts, which I find really interesting and something that he unpacks for us. We talk about this whole idea of why it's important to serve others and why it was important for Sean as a kid, and how he grew up with this idea, and how it was very much a part of his history and of who he is, and why he's still doing the humanitarian work that he's doing. We also talk a little bit about Cambodia. He spent in 1985 some time on the Thai-Cambodia border, so the real interest level there for me personally. You're going to love the interview. Sean's a great guy, a lot of passion, a lot of energy, a lot of intention. Listen in, and also davidpecklive.com for more interviews. And please, they're still flying off the shelves. Real change is incremental. It's my book that if you haven't got a copy, I'd love for you to get one. Stay tuned for Sean Campbell. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We're joined by another very special guest today on this beautiful sunny day here in Toronto. I don't know what it's like out in Calgary, but Sean Campbell, he's the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives, and we're going to find out what the heck that means from Samaritan's Purse. Sean, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, David, and rest assured we've got better weather than you do.
Oh, do you really?
Was
that was there a tone there? Was there a sarcastic tone there, Sean? Or?
Yeah, I lived in Toronto for a few years.
Okay.
And winters like this, I'm glad to be in the West.
Right. Yes. Well, the last couple of days have been awesome. I mean, really, absolutely gorgeous. That blue sky that painting of a sky, and the weather's been just beautiful. I just hope we don't get some sort of weird backdoor surprise with another snowfall in the next week. But
I always tell people there's two places to be when it's sunny: Vancouver and Toronto. The great cities when it's sunny and warm.
So we got lots to talk about today, without a doubt. So tell me a little bit about your role with SP, and so Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives sounds very CIA-like.
Well, when my wife and I worked in Thailand for 4 years. I worked under the UN for a couple of years on the Thai-Cambodian border, and that's where I met Franklin Graham, who is the president of Samaritan's Purse internationally, and the Billy Graham Association. And Franklin invited me to consider the opportunity of coming on in Canada and starting up a very fledgling work out in the Toronto area with Samaritan's Purse.
Now, how long ago the Thai-Cambodia border? You got my interest right out of the gate. How long ago was that?
That was I went out there in 1985.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So spent 4 years there.
Oh, you were right in the middle of it then.
Yeah, we worked in a Khmer Rouge refugee camp. We had all the medical services for the largest Khmer Rouge camp on the Thai-Cambodian border during those years. And, again, it was a unique opportunity to work with the Khmer Rouge, which a lot of groups refused to work with.
Yeah, of course.
We were under an NGO, under contract to the UN, who said, hey, look, this is a great opportunity. These people need help. So I cut my teeth in a camp of about 40,000 Khmer Rouge refugees during those days, and that's where I came across Samaritan's Purse.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, that's 5 years, essentially, after the North Vietnamese ousted the Khmer Rouge, basically took back Cambodia. So, I mean, you were in the middle of a civil war. Paris Peace Accords hadn't even happened then.
Well, if you remember during that time, David, like after the Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia, then they got this crazy idea of defeating the Vietnamese, who were an ally. So the Vietnamese and the Khmer Rouge went to war. And the Vietnamese are very experienced at war at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So the Khmer Rouge quite quickly. So these are where all the camps along the Thai-Cambodian border, probably 1 million people at that time, came to be. And again, in our camp, we had relatives of Pol Pot,
Wow.
Q Sampan, the leadership of the Khmer Rouge were in our refugee camp.
Names that are relevant today with the trials that are going on in Cambodia as we speak. I just interviewed Alexander Hinton, who's written the book Why Did They Kill? And he's got a book, and it's all about the Cambodian genocide. He's a genocide scholar and anthropologist out of Rutgers. And he's got a book about Duik coming out, the guy who ran S-21.
Exactly.
It's it's unbelievable, the layers as you start to peel them back. I knew that Cambodia and Thailand were in your past. I didn't know that you were basically in the middle of it. It's and very much a humanitarian exercise versus what you're doing, I guess, today to some degree. Is that right? Back to my question about your CIA-like title, Director of Strategic Initiatives.
And I hate to make those things complicated because as a Christian, I believe it's very important that we demonstrate the love of God. If we don't do that, we don't have any basis for a platform to talk about that love. And I see my role today as that, and I saw my role in the past as that, as someone who says that there's a God in heaven that loves people. So first and foremost, I need to love them as He loved them. And then by doing that, hopefully that presents an opportunity for me to say what I believe. And I don't believe that we can say what we believe until we demonstrate what we believe.
Do you think, Sean, that you would not be doing this work if you didn't believe in that God? Do you think you would be, I don't know, climbing the corporate ladder, traveling the world? I mean,
you know what? No, I don't, because even as a 12-year-old, I remember when I was in grade 6 or 7, somebody coming and saying, "Hey, we want to give poor children something." And I grew up in a single-family dwelling with 4 older brothers and a mom who barely made it through the month trying to support us. And I remember my favorite thing I had was an Etch-a-Sketch, and I brought that and gave it. So I think even back in those days, I realized that helping others that were, even though we were an unfortunate family, there were less fortunate families than ours.
Right.
And I actually think that God actually blessed that. A 12-year-old kid giving up his Etch-a-Sketch, which was his favorite thing. I think there's something to be said for that. So would I do it if I didn't have faith? Yeah, I think I would. I'd still do it because I believe in serving other people. I think, people are always looking to find themselves.
Yeah.
I think the way you find yourself is in serving others. Then you find yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of a unifying principle to some degree, isn't it? This idea of reaching out to others, and yet it seems to me, you can sort of look. It's very interfaith as well. Like most faiths, it seems have this idea of at least, a version of the golden rule, or loving your neighbor in some way, to see beyond yourself. And yet, Sean, it seems to me. There's an awful lot of us who aren't in that place. And do you know what I'm saying? Like it just.
Well, I do. I look. I've been to 156 countries, and it's amazing to me. Like in places like in Angkor Wat in Siem Reap, Cambodia, that well, and places in India. Like I watch all these foreigners coming, trying to find themselves. It's this journey, right?
Yes.
People are trying to. What's my life mean? What's my purpose?
Yes.
Where am I going? What am I doing? And I admire that journey. And I think people find that the answer in various things. For me, the answer has been in Christ, because I find that Christianity is a religion that talks about, what someone else has done for us, what the Son of God did for us. And, that very model is the model that I think that we ought to embrace as people. That we live our lives for a purpose, and it's a purpose to serve others. It's a purpose to demonstrate the love of God to them. And, so I watch people trying to find this, and I find it interesting the ways that they find it.
Right.
I'm glad I found it in God, Christ.
So what is a strategic initiative for Samaritan's Purse?
Well, right now we've got a lot of projects going on.
I bet you do. Yep.
You and I were talking just earlier. we just flew our DC-8 to Ecuador, so within 24 hours we'll have up and running a 60-bed hospital.
Wow. Okay.
These kinds of things, that's a strategic initiative for us. We've got a lot of work going on in the country of Myanmar, which is formerly known as Burma, with Aung San Suu Kyi's government coming into power a year ago. It's a new day in Burma, but Myanmar, but with a lot of difficulties and challenges because the northern tribal states are being abused and their land's being taken away from them because of the economic value, the mining rights, those kinds of things. So that area in Iraq is a big area for us. We've been working in Iraq for 8 years now, northern Iraq. We're right on the Syrian border, right there. We're 10 kilometers away from ISIS, and those are kind of the initiatives that I'm looking at and overseeing.
Do you? I mean, wow, you've been involved in this kind of work for a long time, Sean. What are some of the observations that you've 156 countries, Thai-Cambodia border in the middle. I mean, in the middle of it, how do you account for some of the things that occurred, in Cambodia and so on? But I guess my question is, what do you learn about those people on that journey? What do you learn about human nature? What do you learn about helping others? And I guess maybe the question really is about affecting change, I suppose, is where I'm really trying to get to.
Yeah, David, what I've observed in all these places, whether it's a war zone, Chechnya or Bosnia during the war, or Sudan, Somalia, any one of these places, I realize how Rwanda, Rwanda really, when the Hutus and the Tutsis went after each other and were slaughtering, it just made me realize. I remember a Time magazine article I saw. The front cover of Time magazine said, "There are no demons left in hell. They're all in Rwanda."
Wow.
Said the missionary.
Wow.
And that was the front of Time magazine. I
Yep.
just thought, I was there. I was in Ratari while, Kigali was burning. You could see it in the distance, and listening to the radio station saying, "Hey, there's Tutsis and they're at this location. Go kill them." That was the radio station.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I realized at that point in time, and other times, I guess, that man is capable of some horrendous things. Like they're overtaken by a passion to kill, to murder, to do these things. At the same time, I realize that there is within each of us created a God image, and that God image means that we can love and care and show compassion. So I've seen the horrors of man, but I've seen the beauty of mankind. And I got to say, that's not just expressed in my Christian faith. I've watched Muslims and Buddhists who are as concerned as I am about caring for people and about, administering to them and helping them. And some of my closest friends are Muslims in the Middle East. And I mean that sincerely. And I watch their care for their people. And I think, as wicked as man's heart can be, it can also be redeeming, powerful in the sense that they're called to help people.
Well, and at some point you do have to ask the question, where does something like that come for? Where does, and it's a question I continue to ask myself with respect to the work that I do. Why does somebody care about other people and somebody else doesn't?
Yeah.
How do you step outside of your own frame of reference? How do you take off the pair of glasses that you're wearing, get out of that wretched framework, whatever that is, whether it's philosophical or theological or religious, and actually stand outside and say, hey, I can actually see life in a different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I guess I answer it this way. I say, and again, from my Christian perspective, everybody's created in the image of God. And so that means there's some kind of God stamp in our hearts. And I think as we recognize that, I think that, generally there's a goodness within people. And I think they desire to help. Sometimes they don't know how to help.
Right.
They don't know where to help.
Right.
But if they're shown the way, I find the majority of people wanting to go that way. And it's not a matter of finances, It's not a matter of having lots of resources so I can do this. I found some of the most generous people to be some of the poorest people. Who recognize where they've come from and who desire to reach out and help somebody else. So,
without a doubt, that is a common thread when I interview people who do, do development or humanitarian work in the majority world, that is definitely a common thread. This idea of generosity and how it's an inclusive kind of approach to for some, not for everybody, obviously, but how some of the supposedly, if we look at things strictly in a financial sense, some of the poorest people in the world are some of the most generous, and I think it's a pretty remarkable observation.
Yes, it's remarkable to us, and it's very humbling, because when I see these people who have next to nothing saying, I can think of this in Sudan and places I've been where, you have one village that has almost nothing.
Right.
Cambodia, even places that you and I have been, you look at them and one village has nothing, but with what they've been given, they want to share with others, and it's actually at that level that I find most appealing and most compelling in my life, when I watch these people who have next to nothing saying, we want to help this village up the street because they have nothing. I'm blown away, and I'm very humbled by it.
So you do. I want to talk a little bit about some of the other work that you do. I'm sure you sit on a variety of boards. There's an event that we're involved in coming up in Toronto called The Least of These, with a woman by the name of Mama Maggie, coming out of Egypt, coming out of Cairo, working in the slums. Sounds like you've stood on the edge of, I'm sure many slums around the world, but just even metaphorically. You were the board chair of this organization. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do with them and why you would, sounds like you're a pretty busy guy. You know what I mean? Why are you volunteering for Stevens?
Well, you know what? I've met two. I've met so many amazing women.
Yeah.
And I'm humbled by that, because I think, gosh, we're the guys who get out there and do this stuff. But
right.
Years ago, I met Mother Teresa in Calcutta, and was blown away by the simplicity of her lifestyle and the incredible service that she is providing. She has a home called for the destitute and dying, which is right beside Kali's temple in Calcutta, and the juxtaposition of those things is amazing to me. But I met her, and she's lovingly caring, not just her staff, but her herself caring for people. And when I met Mama Maggie from Stevens Children years ago, I was blown away. Here's a university professor who would drive by the dumps every day and see the poor going through the dump, trying to find whatever they could to sell. And she became so moved by that, she quit her job and started to serve these people. And every day, Stevens Children cares for over 20,000 children, throughout Egypt. And, it's the largest, and I've been through many, many Middle Eastern countries. It's the largest, compassionate, certainly Christian ministry in all of the Middle East. And when I see people like that, here's a university professor who gave that up for the sake of the least of these, which Jesus calls us to serve. And, I was very humbled by that, very humbled by her story. And I am so glad to be a small little part of that overall work that she's doing in Egypt, caring for children and loving them as Christ would love them.
Sean, do you think that when people think of the Middle East, typically what do you think of? You think of, violence, you think of division, inability to get along and so on. Is there something kind of metaphorical about this work for I don't know, for you, for me, for all of us, frankly, working with kids in slums? I mean, you don't get much more grassroots than that, it seems to me. That's sort of connected to the solution. Does that make a sense? I mean, we both probably believe extreme poverty will never be solved in this lifetime, but we can deal with the stupid poverty, right?
Yeah.
We can deal with the poverty that's just meaningless and makes no sense whatsoever.
Here's I know we have tremendous disagreements with the Islamic faith about core values, but here's where we are alike. When we see the poor and the suffering, one of the key pillars of Islam is to help them. One of the fundamental faith issues of our Christian faith is to serve those that are poor and needy. And I think rather than notice the differences amongst us, we ought to celebrate those things that are similar to our belief system. And I remember years ago during the Gulf War, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, hundreds of thousands of people fled into the Jordanian desert, and looking upon them with one of the Jordanian princesses, and she's looking at all this mass. She said, "Oh, most of these people are Islamic, and they're Muslims. Part of our faith in Islamic belief system is that we care for them, and we're caring for them. And you Christians are coming. We've always been told you're the enemy, you're the bad guys.
Right.
But on this issue, we're united." And I thought, I take great. I guess I take that to heart, that there are certain things that unite us and certain things that we together stand with the Muslims, the Buddhists, Hindus. We agree on certain things. And I know they'll always separate us, but I'm more and more interested on the commonality of those things uniting us as we stand against issues. And I look at it and say, we can do these things together. I look at the Middle East and all the problems, and
that's great.
I've been like kilometers away from ISIS a lot, and I think, when people start questioning their belief systems because it's enacted in certain ways, there's great opportunities to say, hey, look, there's a better way. And as a Christian, I say that better way, Jesus said, is, I love you. I care enough for you that I gave my life for you. And I think we ought to celebrate those commonalities rather than talk about the things that separate us.
What is would you say it's the love? I mean, that's the connecting point. Is it the relational? Is it the community? How's this phrase? Is it the relationship? Is it the community of relationships that sort of draws us all together in that sense? Is that a fair question?
Yeah. We can always talk about the things that separate us. I watch with great interest because I don't think there's any better TV on right now than the American elections. I'm watching the Republicans and the Democrats go at it, and I think you can always get a force together that talks about what they disagree with.
Sure.
I'm more interested in talking about what we agree with.
Right.
And if my faith is real, which there's no question I believe it is, that if people see that in me, they see that I'm to my life, I'm committed to those things. Mm-hmm. I think they'll ask why, and that gives me a reason and an opportunity to talk about the hope that I have in my God, in my Christ. What he did for people. And I think that, in this day and age where people are talking about death, destruction, disasters, all these wars and all these things that are going on, we've got a great message as a believer of Christian people who come together and say, look, there's a better way. We have a God in heaven that loves us. That's the message that I want to take to people, David.
Well, clearly, Sean, this isn't, I don't think, from what I'm hearing, and I don't know you well by any means, but and it's more than just tone of voice. You're not just in this for a paycheck.
Yeah, no.
This isn't just a job. There's a passion here. There's an intention. There's a desire. I don't know, to be something. I don't know. Maybe legacy making going on here, but getting outside of yourself, right?
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with me. Like, I look at it and think, it's not a desire to prove myself or to do something wonderful for God, because he did it all. It's just a realization that what God had done for me through his son Jesus humbles my heart, blows me away. And I think that, when I see those kind of things going on, I realize I've got a role to play in that. I have no choice at the end of the day but to say, God, how do I bless you? How do I serve your creation? And that's what motivates me. If I didn't get paid anything for this, I might have to go work at Walmart,
right.
McDonald's,
Yep.
someplace. But
or come to Toronto and shovel snow. You could always do that.
Yeah, well, we don't need any snow shovelers out in Calgary. So. But I do see it that way. As I'm very humbled by the fact that what God did for me. What's my reasonable response to him is to say, God, what do you want me to do for you? Like, you've blown me away by your love. How do I take that love and express that to others?
And is that kind of what you saw in Mama Maggie? The Mother Teresa of Cairo. Somebody who how does somebody get to a point like that, right? To make a decision like that. That's so sort of, I remember I left the electrical trade after 18 years to study philosophy to get my master's degree. And I remember a couple people, most people were I don't know, affirmed and encouraged and were so supportive. And there were a couple people like, what, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind that you would leave a very good job to go study philosophy? I remember a doctor saying to me, one of my doctors at the time, oh, that and a quarter is going to get you a phone call. Right, which of course means something to you and me, but not to my kids, right? What does that mean, Dad? What do you mean? Why would you need a quarter to make a phone call?
Well, you know what? Anybody that studies philosophy needs help.
Oh, hey, listen, that's another conversation, Sean, for another time.
Yeah.
That'll be that's when you interview me for your podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, actually, you know what? That's funny. The very first, I think, podcast that I ever did, I did not do the interviewing. It was somebody interviewed me, a guy that I taught with, I think, and it was called, no, wait for it, The Unemployed Philosopher's Blog.
It's people like you and sculptors and musicians that, like you're called to the passion, to follow your passion.
Without a doubt.
It always doesn't pay the check.
Oh, man. I remember my first paycheck as a TA doing my master's degree. I'd left, honestly, a very good job back in the early 2000, and it was $189 for 2 weeks. And I've still got the check around somewhere. And I can't believe my wife didn't leave me. It's remarkable. Yeah, she still loves me, Sean. It's
She's a
amazing.
good woman.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I look at these things, and there's something beyond the just the existing and getting a paycheck, however big that paycheck is, because I think those things can satisfy certain aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
But the longing of our hearts and finding something that fulfills the need in our hearts to find meaning and purpose, that's invaluable.
So so I see a lot of photos of Mama Maggie. I'm getting to know her a bit more, and the work that she does, and a lot of them are about just washing children's feet, and I get that from a Christian perspective, without a doubt. But do you think, Sean, that, and I'd love to ask Mama Maggie this, but do you think there's something profoundly spiritual about that in and of itself?
Absolutely. I could say that in a variety of ways, but when I was there and watched the humility with which she does her work, and all her volunteers caring for 20,000 people every day, 20,000 children every day.
That's remarkable.
I can't but be blown away by that. Like, to think that she's got this score of young people, young adults, who volunteer their time to go out to the garbage dumps and the most despicable areas that you can imagine, where, they're melting paper bags to get the product so they could sell it. They're going through, finding needles and things in the garbage dump so they can sell that. And these are a majority of their Coptic Christians. Watching Mother Maggie and her team go into these areas, and the kids are filthy. I mean, you don't even want to touch them. And to see the humility with which they go in and they take these kids, not just they washed my feet when I was there.
Well, I've heard about your feet, Sean. Yeah. I've read about them online.
I just,
it's amazing.
You hear that stuff, but when it's done to you, you are so humbled by it.
Well, it's the I was interviewing somebody not long ago who talked about a story. They went to Namibia. They met somebody. They went to their house and to their house, and the story that he told was the guy had one light bulb in his house, and he unscrewed it from one socket, and they moved to another room, and he screwed the light bulb in another socket. And this, obviously the whole experience had an impact on this guy, Jay Whitelaw, but it was one of those connecting dots for him that's really stuck with him. And we talked about this idea of, you can talk about stories like this, you can read about them, you can watch them on film, but to actually be there and to experience it, it's life-changing.
Yeah, and I would tell anybody that listens to this, listen, if you need a boost in your life, you're not going to find it by elevating yourselves. You're going to find it by lowering yourself to the service of others. And when I watch Mama Maggie and Stephen's children and all their volunteers do this kind of thing, you cannot but be touched by it. When I see Mother Teresa, and I equate those two in the same category. I mean, right. I've met Mother Teresa on a couple of occasions before she passed away, and watching what Mama Maggie does, she is the Mother Teresa of Egypt, no question about it. And when I watch these people, they have this uncanny unexplainable ability to love people and to to go there and to bless them, not to be blessed, but to bless them. In that they are blessed, certainly, but I watched that with great a great desire to learn from that. That how do they do that? What causes them to go above and beyond every day?
Yeah.
To serve other people, and the least of these, the poorest of the poor, the children that Jesus so loved to come to Him. They express that, and I'm blessed by that, and hopefully I'm learning from it.
Yeah. You see it as probably as a bit of an affirmation, I would imagine, of the work that you do as well, but also kind of a challenge, and it's pretty darn encouraging, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's an affirmation, but
yeah.
it's I just don't want to say it's an affirmation. It's so powerful in its witness that it compels me at every level of my life, and I think for just to motivate me is one thing, but I am blown away by their commitment. If I could but live up to an ounce of that, I would be blessed.
So take me back a little bit. We'll probably have to wrap up here shortly, Sean, and
sure.
I always say to everybody, I hope they'll be willing to do a part 2 with me down the road. Take me back a little bit. I'd have to ask this of Mama. You call her Mother Maggie, but what was the moment? What was it that sort of put you over the top? Obviously you look back and you kind of understand where you've come from. You said you've always had this sense of others. Your mother, your family. Was there? Can you look back and was there an experience as a kid? Was there a book that you read, a film that you saw, something that happened that just tipped the scales for you a little bit?
Yeah, I think, David, I was, after I graduated from high school, I took a year of college because I wanted to go into medicine.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in a family of 5 boys, and my mother always wanted a doctor, and I figured I was the youngest, so I got to be that.
Right.
As it turned out, it was my next brother that became the doctor, but I was studying sciences, accepted into UBC and UVic to do the sciences to get into medicine. But it was during that year that I experienced God and His love, and just felt so convicted that I need to change my course of action. So I went to college and seminary, and eventually, went on and did my doctorate. And it was at that time I just realized, look, from college, I went in to become a pastor, and I was a pastor of a wonderful church in British Columbia. And I'd stand up there every Sunday and talk about our faith, and the reasons to serve God, and the reasons why we need to be spiritual. And I always found that just because I said that, people weren't necessarily becoming spiritual.
Right.
So my wife and I began this journey of praying and saying, God, what do we do with this? So we were there for almost 4 years, and that's when we left to go overseas to work in a refugee camp on the Thai-Cambodian border in a war zone where we were shelled 150 times in 2 years, every other day. And that's where my faith became real, where I took all the words that I would say to people about God's love and really be in an environment where I could never say any of those words.
Right.
The only way I had to communicate that was by the way I lived. And I guess that was a real turning point for me, realizing that, hey, you know what? Our faith is about living Christ and preaching Christ. As Paul says in Romans chapter 15, I won the Gentiles to faith by the way I lived and by my message. Those are the key elements of the gospel.
It's actionable items. You want to see tangible results. You want boots on the ground kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the world is looking. They're looking for someone who really is convicted about what they believe and who lives that. And I think that we as Christians, we profess Christ with our mouths. And when people see us living that and professing that, they say, that's of interest to me. So tell me more. It gives us an opportunity to give a reason for the hope that we have.
So just to wrap up, let's talk just a tiny bit. So the event is coming up May the 12th in Toronto.
Yes.
Mama Maggie's going to be here. I think it's her first Toronto appearance. Michael Corden's going to be there to interview her on stage. Jacob Moon's music, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but he's absolutely terrific. And are you hoping to board chair, hoping to be there as well, I understand?
Yes, I am.
That's great.
I'm leaving this weekend for back to Myanmar and to Vietnam to follow up on some projects, and then I'll get home and I'll hopefully be out in Toronto at that time, and And I'd love to meet whoever listens to this. Come on up and say hello.
Absolutely. Sean, just quickly, are you like 102?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. Like, I just listened to, where you've been and what you've done. I'm like, how old is this guy?
Yeah,
He looks a lot like Gandalf, David.
Yeah, I'm going to be 58 this year, and
Nice.
I just, I was hiking in Burma, a year ago. We had this bright idea to go into northern Myanmar and work with the tribal groups up there, so I hiked up there, and when I was 30, this was fun.
Right.
Now that I'm in my late 50s, I'm thinking, bless the 30-years.
Yes.
For them.
Not quite the same anymore. Yeah, no.
But it is equally as important, just not the same for me.
Yeah, no, I understand. Well, listen, I hope we can do part 2, Sean. We've got so much more ground to cover. But Sean Campbell, he's a senior director of strategic initiatives at Samaritan's Purse out in Calgary. He's also the board chair for the Stevens Children Foundation here in Toronto. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Sean.
My pleasure, David.